The old man reached the center of the Whitmore grand lobby just as Caroline Whitmore began speaking about dignity. His coat was soaked at the shoulders. Rainwater ran from his gray beard and darkened the marble beneath his shoes. In one hand, he held a battered cap. In the other, hidden inside his fist, was an old brass key with a leather tag worn nearly smooth. Above him, a crystal chandelier scattered light over gowns, tuxedos, white roses, champagne glasses, and polished trays of sparkling cider. At the far end of the room, behind a podium wrapped in cream-colored flowers, a banner read, "The Whitmore Foundation. Restoring dignity, one life at a time. No one restored his." A woman near the staircase pulled her purse closer. A donor turned his shoulder with visible disgust. One guest lifted his phone, not to help, but to record. The string quartet kept playing softly, as if music could cover the sound of a human being judged. At the podium, Caroline stopped mid-sentence. She was elegant, controlled, and furious. The old man looked at her with tired eyes. "I only need a room for the night," he said. The lobby manager stepped between them. "Sir, this is a private event. I know this hotel," the old man said. A guest near the bar gave a short laugh. "Apparently not well enough to know he doesn't belong here." Caroline's face tightened. The board chair was watching. 2 major donors were watching. A business reporter near the bar was watching. For years, people had questioned whether Caroline was strong enough to inherit her father's empire. They called her polished but untested, ambitious but sheltered, a daughter standing in a giant shadow. Now a homeless man stood in the middle of her perfect gala, threatening to turn her leadership into a spectacle. She stepped down from the podium. The old man's expression changed when she came closer. It was not fear. It was something worse. Hope. "Carrie," he whispered. The word struck her like something from another life. For one second, Caroline Whitmore looked less like a CEO and more like a daughter who had heard a voice through a locked door. Then shame became anger. "Do not call me that." The old man opened his hand. The brass key caught the chandelier light. Its leather tag was scratched and dark from age, but a faint hand-pressed mark still showed near the bottom. "I was told this place still had one for someone with nowhere to go." The lobby manager frowned at the key. "Where did you get that?" The old man closed his fingers around it. Caroline looked at the guests, then at the phones, then at the board chair's hardening face. "People like him don't need rooms," she said. "They need removal." The sentence was quiet enough to sound controlled and loud enough to wound. Security moved in. The old man did not fight. He only tried to protect the key. A guard caught his wrist. The old man stumbled. The key slipped from his fingers and struck the marble with a bright, lonely ring. The sound cut through the lobby. He bent for it. Caroline's heel came down first. The leather tag disappeared beneath her shoe. The old man froze. For the first time, his voice broke. "Please," he said. Not that. No one in the lobby understood why an old key mattered so much, but they would. Before morning, Caroline Whitmore would learn that the man she had ordered out was not a threat to her father's legacy. He was her father, and the key beneath her shoe was the first promise her family had ever made. Security pulled him backward. His cap fell. A waiter looked away. The guest with the phone kept recording until a staff member touched his arm and whispered something about privacy. Caroline did not look at the old man again. She looked at the key, still beneath her shoe, and lifted her heel as if releasing something dirty. The lobby manager picked it up with 2 fingers. "Lost property?" he asked. Caroline's jaw tightened. "Security office. And write a report. I want this contained." The old man heard those words from the doorway. Contained. That was what they called shame when it happened to powerful people. Outside, the rain had thinned into mist. The service alley smelled of wet concrete, old cooking oil, and cold metal. Security released him beside the loading dock, not violently enough to bruise him, but firmly enough to make the message clear. "Do not come back." The door closed. For a moment, the old man stood alone beneath the yellow service light. Inside, his daughter was about to continue a speech about compassion. Outside, the man who had given her everything placed one hand against the brick wall of the hotel he had built and tried to steady his breathing. Then the service door opened a crack. A young bellman slipped out, holding a paper cup of coffee in one hand and a white napkin in the other. "Sir," the young man whispered, "I think this belongs to you." The old man opened the napkin. The brass key lay inside, scratched but unbroken. The leather tag had a fresh mark from Caroline's heel. The young bellman glanced back nervously. "My manager said if I took one step outside with you, I shouldn't come back for my next shift." The old man looked at him. "And yet you came." The bellman swallowed. "My grandmother cleaned rooms for 30 years. She said if a man is cold, you don't hold a meeting about whether he deserves coffee." The old man's eyes filled, but he did not let the tears fall. "What's your name?" "Miguel Santos." The old man looked down at the key again. Beneath the damage and age, 2 faint initials still showed on the leather. A.W. Miguel saw them too. "Are those your initials?" he asked. The old man closed his hand around the key. "They used to mean something here." He looked back at the glowing windows of the Whitmore Grand. Then he whispered, "Eleanor, I think we waited too long." 27 years earlier, before the Whitmore name meant crystal chandeliers and executive suites, Arthur and Eleanor Whitmore had bought a dime roadside inn with 7 rooms, a leaking roof, and a sign that buzzed like an angry insect every time it rained. They had no empire then, no gala, no foundation, no board. Just debt, coffee, floor polish, and a baby daughter who sometimes slept in a laundry basket behind the front desk because they could not afford a sitter. Caroline grew up to the sound of guest footsteps overhead. She learned to count change from the cash drawer before she understood long division. She watched her mother fold towels as if even tired cotton deserved respect. The first Whitmore Inn was not beautiful. The carpet held old cigarette smoke. The ice machine groaned. In winter, the pipes knocked like someone trapped inside the walls. But Eleanor loved it, especially room 7. Room 7 sat at the back of the building near the vending machines. The heater coughed. The door stuck after rain. The wallpaper peeled behind the nightstand. It was the room guests accepted only when the others were full. Eleanor called it the Mercy Room. Arthur used to laugh at that. "Mercy doesn't pay the electric bill," he would say. And Eleanor would answer, "No, but it reminds us why we turn the lights on." One December night, a man came into the lobby with frost on his eyelashes and empty pockets. He had lost his job, lost his apartment, and walked miles in weather that could stiffen a man's fingers. Arthur looked at the ledger. They needed every dollar. Eleanor looked at the man. Then she took the brass key to room 7 from the hook. "No person should feel smaller after walking through our doors," she told Arthur. They gave the man the room for free. In the morning, he left a note on the pillow. "Thank you for letting me feel human for one more night." Arthur kept that note. 2 years later, the same man returned in a clean suit. He had rebuilt his life. He introduced Arthur to the lender who helped finance their second property. But Arthur never remembered room 7 because kindness made him money. He remembered it because kindness had saved him from becoming the kind of man who measured people too quickly. Years passed. The Whitmore Inn became Whitmore House. Whitmore House became Whitmore Hotels. The girl who once slept behind the desk grew into Caroline Whitmore, elegant, disciplined, brilliant, and quietly terrified of being dismissed as nothing more than Arthur's daughter. Then Eleanor died. The illness took her slowly, one ordinary thing at a time. First the long walks, then the dinner parties, then the training days with new housekeepers. Then, finally, her voice in the morning. After the funeral, Arthur changed. He still attended board meetings. He still signed documents. He still smiled when cameras were present. But something essential in him had stepped backward from the world. Caroline saw his grief as absence. Then she saw it as opportunity. She took over daily operations. She modernized booking systems, cut programs that did not produce measurable return, rebranded the foundation, improved margins, attracted investors, and impressed the board. The business press praised her. The board admired her. Consultants called her efficient. But old employees noticed what disappeared. The emergency rooms for stranded guests became reputation risk inventory. The hardship fund became community engagement capital. The lobby quote from Eleanor stayed on the wall, but fewer people seemed to read it. No person should feel smaller after walking through our doors. Arthur read it every time he entered. Caroline walked past it every morning. 3 weeks before the gala, Caroline visited Arthur at his private residence outside the city. She brought a leather folder and wore the calm, careful expression she used when she wanted something difficult to sound reasonable. "Dad," she said. The transition has gone on long enough. Arthur sat near the window with a blanket over his knee, though he was not cold. "The company needs clarity," she continued. "Investors need certainty. The board needs to know I have authority that cannot be questioned every time someone wants to invoke your name." Arthur looked at her. "You want control. I want responsibility. They are not the same." Her mouth tightened. "I have carried this company for 4 years while you disappeared into memories." Arthur did not defend himself, because part of it was true. But memories were not empty places. Not to him. Caroline opened the folder. "The final transfer documents are ready. We can announce the leadership transition at the foundation gala. It will be clean, public, strong." Arthur repeated the word softly. "Strong! Yes, strong!" His eyes moved to the mantel. There, beside Eleanor's photograph, lay the old brass key from room 7. Caroline followed his gaze and sighed. "You still keep that old thing out?" Arthur reached for it. "This old thing is where all of this began." "No, Dad. This began with risk, discipline, timing, and business sense. Not a sentimental key." Arthur looked at the key for a long moment. Then he said, "Your mother would have disagreed." Caroline's eyes hardened. "Mom isn't here to run a modern hotel group." The room went still. Caroline regretted the sentence as soon as it left her mouth, but she did not take it back. That was one of her great flaws. She treated apology as weakness until damage had already become permanent. Arthur placed the folder on the table without signing. "I need time," Caroline stood. "Time is what people ask for when they don't want to make a decision." Arthur looked up at her. "No. Time is what people need when the decision still has a soul attached to it." After she left, Arthur called his attorney. He did not change the company. He did not trap Caroline. He did not create a theatrical revenge plan. He simply delayed the final transfer and added one private instruction. If the founding principle of the Whitmore company was no longer understood by its future leadership, the transfer would not proceed. Then he called Mrs. Alvarez. She had been a housekeeper in the first inn when Caroline was small enough to hide under folded sheets. Now retired, she still trained new staff twice a month on old Whitmore standards. "Do you still have access to the staff changing room?" Arthur asked. Mrs. Alvarez was silent for a long moment. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, "what are you planning? Something foolish, maybe. If Eleanor were here, would she stop you?" Arthur looked at the brass key. "No," he said. "She would make sure I wore warmer socks." On the evening of the gala, Arthur dressed in worn clothes he had collected through a shelter director he privately supported. He did not want theatrical rags. He did not want to imitate suffering. He wanted to enter his hotel as what many people saw before they saw anything else: an inconvenience. Before leaving, he took the brass key from the mantel. "Room 7, welcome home." He held it until his palm warmed the metal. Then Arthur Whitmore went to his own hotel as a man without a name. And when his daughter looked at him beneath the chandeliers, she did not see her father. She saw a threat to the room. By 9 o'clock, the story inside the Whitmore Grand had already changed. It was no longer about an old man asking for a room. It was about a trespasser. That was the word the lobby manager used in his report. Trespasser, disruptive, unhoused male, refused to leave. Attempted to retain unidentified hotel property. Subject appeared confused and potentially unstable. He typed the words quickly in the office behind reception, while the gala continued only yards away. His hands were shaking, not from guilt, but from fear that Caroline would blame him for letting the man reach the center of the lobby. A false story does not need to be perfect. It only needs to arrive before the truth. Caroline stood in a private corridor outside the ballroom, listening to her communications director whisper updates. No major posts yet. A few guests recorded it, but we asked them not to share until security reviews the disturbance. Donors are fine. The board noticed, but they understand. Caroline nodded. She felt hot under her diamonds. Not ashamed. Not exactly. Shame would have required stillness, and Caroline had spent her adult life outrunning stillness. Where is the man now? She asked. Removed from the property. The key. Recovered. Then apparently taken by the bellman. Caroline's eyes narrowed. Miguel? Yes. Why? He said the man dropped it. Caroline looked toward the lobby, where guests were still pretending the evening had not been interrupted. Write him up. Her communications director hesitated. For returning a key? For leaving his post during a security incident? The woman nodded. And the report? Caroline asked. Being prepared. Good. I want it in the file before anyone decides this was something other than what it was. What was it? Caroline turned slowly. A disruption. Inside the ballroom, the applause rose as Caroline returned to the stage. She smiled perfectly. My father taught me that hospitality is not simply a business, she said. It is a promise. Arthur heard those words through a side service door Mrs. Alvarez had opened for him. He stood in shadow, still wearing the damp coat, unseen by the guests. My mother believed no person should feel smaller after walking through our doors, Caroline continued. Tonight, we honor that legacy. Arthur's hand tightened around the brass key. Mrs. Alvarez stood beside him, small and straight-backed, her silver hair pinned neatly. She sounds like Eleanor, she whispered. Arthur did not take his eyes off Caroline. No, he said. She sounds like she memorized her. Caroline spoke beautifully. That was the painful part. She knew the language of mercy. She knew where to pause. She knew how to soften her voice when mentioning her mother. She knew how to turn grief into donor confidence. Then came the line that changed everything. My father could not join us tonight, Caroline said, but he is resting peacefully at home and fully supportive of the transition we now begin. Arthur became very still. Mrs. Alvarez looked at him. Arthur? She's announcing it, but you didn't sign. No. The applause began before Caroline finished. The board chair rose from his table. Donor smiled. Cameras lifted. Caroline held the room exactly as she had wanted to hold it. Cleanly, publicly, strongly. And Arthur, the man whose support she had just claimed, stood 20 yards away in a service corridor wearing the coat she had ordered removed from her lobby. That was the contradiction. The official story said he was absent. The truth was standing behind the wall. Mrs. Alvarez touched his sleeve. You can stop this now. Arthur watched Caroline receive applause for a blessing he had not given, I know, but he did not move, not yet. If he walked in now, the evening would become a spectacle. People would say grief had made him dramatic. They would say he had humiliated his daughter because he could not let go. They would make the story about power. Arthur needed the story to become about character. Then Caroline's assistant entered the corridor with a legal memo in her hand. She did not notice Arthur in the shadows. She was speaking quickly into her phone. Yes, the incident tonight may support the concern. If Mr. Whitmore is wandering or confused, the board needs emergency clarity before the market hears rumors. Prepare the competency language, but keep it quiet for now. Arthur's face changed. Mrs. Alvarez's hand tightened around his arm. The humiliation was no longer only personal. Caroline's team was preparing to use the incident to suggest that Arthur Whitmore might no longer be mentally fit to control his own company. The man they had thrown out as a stranger could now become evidence against himself. In the service alley, Miguel had already been warned. The lobby manager caught him near the employee entrance. You leave your post again for that man, and you are done here. Miguel stood with his cap in his hands. He was cold. This is a 5-star hotel, not a soup kitchen. Miguel looked toward the ballroom doors. My grandmother cleaned rooms for 30 years. I don't care what your grandmother did. Miguel's face went quiet. That was the moment he decided. Some jobs ask people to perform service. Others test whether they have a soul left after the training. He returned to the lobby, but he did not stop thinking about the initials on the key. A.W. After the gala speech, Caroline moved toward a private boardroom on the upper floor. Several board members wanted an immediate discussion. They were pleased by the public announcement. They were less pleased by the disturbance. The legal memo had made the room colder. If Arthur was absent, grieving, aging, and unstable, the board could justify accelerating Caroline's authority. Power, Caroline believed, belonged to those who took the room before doubt entered it. Arthur changed out of the wet coat in the staff room. Mrs. Alvarez had brought him a dark suit, plain but well cut, the kind he had worn years ago before stylists and publicists began choosing his clothes. But when he approached the executive elevator, a security guard stepped in front of him. "Sir, this area is restricted." Arthur looked at the elevator doors. "I'm aware. You need clearance, Mrs. Alvarez stepped forward. "This is Mr." Arthur lifted one hand. The guard waited. Arthur could have said his name. He could have ended it in one sentence. Instead, he looked past the guard toward the private floors of his own hotel, where his daughter was preparing to accept authority by using his silence, his absence, and perhaps even his humiliation. For one terrible moment, he understood the full cost of being unseen. He had built buildings so strangers could enter safely. Now he could not reach his own boardroom without proving he belonged. "Get Miguel," Arthur said quietly. Mrs. Alvarez frowned. "The bellman?" Arthur nodded. The young man saw the key before anyone remembered the man. The truth did not enter the boardroom all at once. It came in pieces. The first crack came from a photograph. Miguel found it near the east entrance on the founder's wall. He had walked by it many times without studying it. Most employees had. The wall had become decorative memory. Old photographs, polished plaques, faded ribbon-cutting scissors, a picture of the first Whitmore Inn. But that night, the key made the past feel awake. Miguel stopped in front of one photograph. A young Arthur Whitmore stood beside a woman with kind eyes and wind-blown hair. Eleanor. Between them was a little girl holding a stuffed rabbit. Behind them, a wooden sign read Whitmore Inn, and in young Arthur's right hand was a brass key with a leather tag. Miguel leaned closer. The photograph was old, but the key was unmistakable. The same shape, the same worn oval tag, the same heavy bow. His breath caught. Then he saw something else beneath the display. A small locked Founder's archive box built into the wall below the photograph. A brass plate read, Room 7 Archive, opened only for training and founder review. Miguel ran. The denial came first, as it always does when truth threatens powerful people. In the private boardroom, Caroline stood at the head of a long walnut table while board members settled into leather chairs. The gala had gone well enough. The disturbance had been contained. The announcement had been warmly received. A legal memo sat near the board chair's hand. Caroline felt control returning. Then the door opened. Miguel entered, flushed and breathless, followed by Mrs. Alvarez. Caroline's expression hardened. "This is a private meeting," Miguel swallowed. "Mom, I'm sorry, but there's something you need to see. Not now. It's about the man from the lobby." The room shifted. The board chair looked irritated. "Is there a security issue?" Caroline's voice dropped. "Mr. Santos, you are a bellman. This is not your place." Miguel flinched. But he did not leave. "That key," he said. "It wasn't stolen." Caroline stared at him. "What did you say?" "The brass key. It matches the one in the photograph downstairs, the first in, room 7. The lobby manager, who had been called in for the incident report, stepped forward from the hallway. "Miguel, stop talking." But another voice spoke from behind them. "It is not a decoration." Everyone turned. Arthur Whitmore stood in the doorway, not in the soaked coat now, not with the battered cap. He wore a dark suit, simple and old-fashioned, and his face looked more tired than angry. For a moment, no one understood. The homeless man from the lobby and the founder from the photographs could not occupy the same body in their minds. One belonged outside, one belonged on the wall. Caroline stood so quickly, her chair struck the wall behind her. "Dad?" Arthur walked to the table. His steps were slow, but no one mistook them for weakness. He opened his hand and placed the brass key on the walnut surface. The sound was small. The silence after it was not. Caroline stared at the key. Arthur asked, "Do you recognize?" Her first instinct was defense. "You staged this," she said. You came into my gala dressed like that to humiliate me in front of the board." Arthur looked at her for a long moment. "No, Caroline. I dressed like a stranger. You chose to make me one." The words hit harder than shouting. The board chair leaned forward. "Arthur, explain this." Arthur touched the leather tag. The mark from Caroline's heel was still visible. "This key opened room 7 of the first Whitmore Inn. The night your mother and I almost lost that inn, she gave this key to a man who could not pay. I told her Mercy would bankrupt us. She told me a sentence that became the only reason this company deserved to grow." He looked at Caroline. "No person should feel smaller after walking through our doors." Caroline's mouth trembled. Arthur continued slowly. "Tonight, I stood beneath those words. I asked for one room. No money, no name, no proof that I mattered." The lobby manager shifted near the door. Arthur turned to him. "Read your report." The man's face drained. "Mr. Whitmore, read it." With shaking hands, the manager opened the folder. "Unhoused male entered lobby during private event. Subject became disruptive. Refused to leave. Attempted to retain unidentified hotel property. Subject appeared confused and potentially unstable." Arthur nodded. "Did I threaten anyone?" "No, sir." "Did I shout?" "No, sir." "Did I steal this key?" "No, sir." "Did anyone ask my name?" "No, sir." Arthur looked back at Caroline. "Did you?" She could not speak. That silence was the emotional confirmation. The failure was not that Caroline had not recognized her father. The failure was that she had not asked a stranger a single human question before condemning him. Then came the second proof. Miguel stepped forward with the photograph from the founder's wall pulled up on his phone. "That's the same key," he said quietly. "And there's an archive box under the picture." "Mrs." Alvarez placed a small metal box on the table. Arthur took the brass key and inserted it into the lock. For a second, it would not turn. The room waited. Then the old mechanism gave way. Inside was a yellowed envelope and a folded note. Arthur did not touch the note first. He looked at Caroline. "Your mother wrote this after the first night we gave room 7 away." He handed it to her. Caroline unfolded the paper. The handwriting was Eleanor's. "If this inn ever becomes more than 7 rooms, let it remember the first room we gave without asking what the man could give back." Caroline pressed one hand to her mouth. Arthur placed another paper beside it, the old note from the man who had slept in room 7. "Thank you for letting me feel human for one more night." The boardroom had no defense against that sentence. Arthur reached into his jacket and removed a sealed envelope with his attorney's mark on it. "The transfer of controlling authority," he said. Caroline closed her eyes. The final truth was now irreversible. She had not merely embarrassed an old man. She had publicly betrayed the founding promise of the company she wanted to inherit. The board chair looked toward the legal memo. Arthur noticed. "What is that?" No one answered. Arthur extended his hand. The board chair reluctantly passed it across the table. Arthur read the heading. "Emergency Competency Concern, Arthur Whitmore." Caroline's face went white. "I didn't approve that." Arthur looked at her. "But your people prepared it because of the incident you created." She shook her head. "I didn't know it was you." Arthur's voice lowered. "I did not need you to recognize your father tonight. I needed you to recognize a person." No one moved. The brass key lay on the table between them. No longer proof of ownership, proof of failure. Arthur turned toward Miguel. "This young man has worked here 4 months. He had less authority than anyone in that lobby. He was the only one who offered me water. He was the only one who returned what mattered. He was the only one who became curious when something did not feel right." Miguel looked down, embarrassed by attention he had never asked for. Arthur faced the board again. "So before anyone speaks to me about succession, market confidence, brand stability, or emergency authority, answer one question." He paused. "Who in this room remembered why we built hotels?" No one answered, and for once, silence told the truth. Caroline expected her father to destroy her. Part of her almost wanted him to. Public punishment would have been easier than the quietness in his eyes. Anger would have given her something to resist. A shouting match would have allowed her to become a victim of his temper. But Arthur gave her no such shelter. He sat at the head of the boardroom table with the brass key before him, Eleanor's note beside it, and the unsigned transfer resting under his hand. "The transfer will not be signed tonight," he said. No one objected. "Caroline will step down as acting CEO, effective immediately." Her face went pale. There it was, the consequence. Her authority, her public certainty, her years of proving herself, all falling into the space between one sentence and the next. But Arthur was not finished. "She will not be removed from the company permanently unless she refuses the work required to understand it." The board chair frowned. "What work?" Arthur looked at his daughter. 6 months. No executive office, no private driver, no special title. You will work anonymously in the places where this company's dignity is either protected or destroyed. Laundry, housekeeping, night desk, kitchen receiving, guest services. And before that begins, you will correct the lie." Caroline looked up. "What lie?" Arthur touched the incident report. "This one." The next morning, Caroline stood in the lobby in front of the staff. Not donors, not investors, not cameras. The people who had watched her pass them for years. Housekeepers stood near the staircase. Bellmen lined the wall. Kitchen staff waited near the service door. Front desk clerks stood with folded hands. Some were angry. Some were curious. Some were simply tired. Arthur stood near the founder's wall. Miguel stood behind the front desk. Mrs. Alvarez stood beside the housekeepers, her face unreadable. Caroline held the incident report in both hands. They were trembling. She began to read. "Unhoused male entered lobby during private event." Then she stopped, her eyes lifted. That sentence was written to make him sound like a problem before he was seen as a person. No one spoke. She continued. "Subject became disruptive." Her voice cracked. He did not become disruptive. "We became uncomfortable." She looked down again, refused to leave, attempted to retain unidentified hotel property. Her eyes moved to the brass key on the counter. It was not unidentified. It was the first key this family ever gave to someone who needed mercy. Then came the hardest line. Subject appeared confused and potentially unstable. Caroline could barely finish it. "No," she said. Subject appeared cold, tired, and unwelcome. We chose not to ask his name. The lobby remained silent. Not cruel silence, listening silence. Caroline folded the report. "I used the word dignity in public and denied it in practice. I cannot undo that. I can only begin again lower than the place where I failed." Arthur did not smile, but his eyes changed. 6 months passed. Caroline did not announce her work program publicly. Arthur refused to turn repentance into marketing. At the first property, she used the name Carrie Whitmore, not Caroline. And most employees assumed she was a distant family member placed in training after an embarrassment. She stripped beds until her back ached. She folded towels until her fingers dried and cracked. She worked the night desk while angry guests insulted her over problems she had not caused. She watched housekeepers leave pain medicine in their lockers because they could not afford to lose hours. She watched kitchen staff feed one another before feeding themselves. She learned that hotel work was not softness, it was endurance. It was patience under disrespect. It was invisible labor performed behind beautiful doors. She learned the weight of keys. Plastic key cards by the 100. Master keys clipped to belts, laundry keys, storage keys, emergency keys. All of them carried trust. All of them opened something someone else depended on. One night in the 4th month, at a small Whitmore property near a highway, an elderly woman came to the desk at 1:17 in the morning. Her husband had been transferred to a nearby medical center. Her card had declined. Her hair was flattened from hours in a waiting room chair, and her hands shook with exhaustion. "I can leave my watch," the woman said. "It was my mother's. I just need a few hours to sleep." Caroline looked at the woman. Then she heard herself from months earlier. People like him don't need rooms. They need removal. Caroline opened the drawer beneath the desk and found the old emergency stay form. The policy had almost disappeared under years of efficiency, but Arthur had never removed it completely. She filled it out. Then she slid a key card across the counter. "You're safe here tonight," Caroline said. The woman began to cry. There were no cameras, no donors, no applause, no father watching. That was why it mattered. Arthur heard about it from someone else 2 days later. He did not call Caroline immediately. He did not congratulate her. He simply sat for a long time beside Eleanor's photograph and let himself believe that repair, while slow, was still possible. At the end of 6 months, Caroline returned to the Whitmore Grand before sunrise. The lobby was almost empty. Morning light had just begun to touch the marble. A housekeeper moved silently near the staircase. Miguel stood at the front desk in a better-fitting suit, still humble, still watchful. Arthur waited near the founder's wall. He looked older than he had 6 months earlier, but not weaker. Caroline approached him in a plain navy dress, no diamonds. "I don't know if I earned anything," she said. Arthur studied her face. For the first time in years, she did not look polished. She looked present. "That is a better beginning than certainty," he said. Miguel reached beneath the counter and brought out the old brass key. Arthur took it, then held it between himself and Caroline. "This key does not give you the company," he said. "It does not erase what happened. It does not make trust automatic. I know, but it can remind you what the company is for." Caroline looked at it, but did not reach. "I'm not asking for it back." Arthur nodded. "Good," she swallowed. "Do you think one day you'll trust me again?" Arthur looked toward the lobby doors. "I already see you differently." Hope rose in her face. Then he said gently, "But differently is not the same as fully." She nodded, and this time she did not defend herself. Arthur walked to the front desk and hung the brass key on a small hook beneath a new plaque Caroline herself had requested. Room 7. The first room we gave before we asked for payment. May no person leave smaller than they came. The final transfer would not be signed that morning. Arthur had decided on a different structure. Caroline could return in a reduced leadership role under oversight. Miguel would enter the leadership development program. Mrs. Alvarez would help build a company-wide dignity standard that applied not only to paying guests, but to employees, strangers, and anyone who came through the doors in need. It was not revenge. It was repair. Outside, the city was waking. Inside, natural light softened the marble that had once reflected Arthur's humiliation. The hotel no longer looked like a stage for wealthy people. For a moment, it looked like what Eleanor had always wanted it to be, a shelter between storms. Arthur stepped back from the front desk. Caroline stood beside him, not forgiven completely, not condemned forever, just standing in the place where truth had finally opened a door. And for the first time in many years, Arthur Whitmore walked through his own hotel lobby and felt not powerful, not famous, not obeyed. He felt welcome. Some rooms reveal people, not because the walls are special, but because power changes when someone appears to have none. In a beautiful lobby under bright lights, surrounded by polished language about kindness, Arthur Whitmore learned the truth many people learn too late. Values are not proven in speeches. They are proven in the moment when helping someone might cost us comfort, image, or control. Caroline's failure was painful because it was believable. Fear can make people cold. Pressure can make cruelty sound practical. Ambition can teach a person to protect the brand while forgetting the human being standing right in front of them. But explanation is not the same as excuse. The lesson of this story is simple. Leadership is not measured by how well someone impresses the powerful. It is measured by how safely the powerless can stand in their presence. Have you ever seen someone reveal who they really were by the way they treated a stranger who could offer them nothing? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you value original stories about dignity, hidden truth, and emotional justice, consider subscribing to The Last Truth Stories.